What is a variable? How to define a variable, and what is it good for in Python? A variable is nothing more than just a reserved location in your computer's memory used to store information, values to be more precise. This means that when you create a variable, you reserve some space in the memory. You can store different types of data using a variable. You can store a string, a number, a list, or any other data type that you can think of. Now, unlike other programming languages, in Python you don't have to explicitly declare a variable. Instead, the declaration is done automatically when you assign a value to that variable, no matter what type of data you decide to assign to that memory location. Furthermore, you can later access the value referenced by that variable and use it in other areas of your Python application. Now, let's think of how you should properly name a variable in Python. Well, there are several rules to consider and follow for a clean and compliant code, and also for avoiding any conflicts with Python's built-in names. First, a variable should always start with a letter, usually lowercase, and never start with a number or any other symbol. However, there is one exception to this rule. Some variable names start with underscore or double underscore, but these are Python-specific structures, so leave them to Python. The variable name may contain lowercase or uppercase letters, numbers, and the underscore sign, but, as I said, not as the first character. Also, do not include spaces or any other special characters inside variable names. This means no dollar signs, no commas, no parentheses, no question marks, and so on. And remember, Python names are case sensitive, so a variable called myVar is a different variable than a variable called my_var with a capital V. Another thing about variable names is that you should keep a reasonable name length so that it will be easier for you to remember it and reference it inside your code. The last thing I should mention on this topic is that there are some Python reserved names, also called keywords, which you cannot use as a variable name. I have included a list of these Python keywords in the next lecture. You should keep it at hand and read it anytime you're in doubt. Now let's see how we can assign a value to a variable. The rule is to use the equal sign. This should be regarded as an assignment operator rather than the usual equal sign used in math. In the left side of the equal sign, you type in the variable name, and in the right side, you type the value you want to assign to that variable. It doesn't matter if you leave a space between each side and the equal sign. Actually, I would advise you to leave a space on each side of the equal sign for better readability of your code. So myVar space equals space 10 would be the correct way and the most easy to read way of defining a variable. You are also able to do multiple assignments, so you can assign a value to multiple variables at the same time. The syntax for this would be a equals b equals c equals 10, and now if you check a, it will be 10, b also 10, and c of course also 10. Another thing you can do is you can assign a different value for each variable within the same line of code, like this: a, comma, b, comma, c equals 1, comma, 2, comma, 3. Now if you check, a is 1, b 2, and c is equal to 3. I think that's really cool and may come in handy someday. Now let's have a brief look at how Python performs the variable assignment. For this, we are going to use the id built-in function, which returns the identity, the location identifier of a variable inside the computer's memory. So let's assign the value 10 to variable a equals 10. Okay, now let's use the id function to see what is the address or identity of the value 10 in the computer's memory. So id of 10, enter. Now let's do the same thing on a, id of a. Notice we're getting the same value. That's because a is pointing to the location in memory in which the value 10 is stored. Now let's create variable b, which points to variable a. And let's use the same ID function to see its location. So b equals a. Now if we do an ID of b, surprise, surprise, we got the same value as above because b is now pointing to the location in memory which 10 is stored as well. Think of this like putting two labels on the same recipient. The content of the recipient is the same, but it can be referred to in two ways depending on which label you read. Now let's change the value of b to 20, for example, and now let's check its ID again. So ID of b. As you can see, the ID of b is now different than before because it is now pointing to the location in memory in which the value 20 is stored. However, the ID of a is still the same since it is still pointing to the value 10. ID of a, and indeed a keeps its location in memory. Now, since we are interested in the practical use of Python into the real world, I will not get into any more details regarding memory assignment and any other deep concepts. Instead, I would prefer to move on and talk about which data types you will encounter in Python and how to handle and use them into your programs.